right, I'd like to call a meeting to order, Building Advisory Board. Any public comment, questions from the public related to topics that are not part of the meeting agenda but are related to the authority and responsibility of the Building Advisory Board? Any comment? Not seeing any. Next item is approve the minutes, last meeting.
I move that we approve the meeting minutes for the last meeting.
Second.
We have a approval and a second. All in favor? Aye. The same sign, disapprove. Motion carried. Next on the agenda, code adoption, significant changes, a refresher. Jim?
Thank you, Chairman, member of the boards, members in the audience. This is the refresher I had spoken to the board several weeks ago, months ago. It's been quite a process since September 2014 to get to this point. What I'm presenting to or providing for you this evening is exactly what was presented to the City Commission in two separate study sessions. That being said, it's also going to be left to the discretion of the chair. If this becomes extra lengthy, we can divide this up into two different meetings so we can bring part of it back next month if necessary, because it is quite a long presentation. And I know some of our board members have other items or other things that they must attend to and will be leaving early as it is before this presentation is probably over. So you can give me the timeout signal or whatever it is you feel necessary to say, hey, okay, we need to continue this next month or whatever the case may be. To begin, on a sad note, those of you that sat with me during all of these subcommittee meetings, you know that Mr. Bob Shepard with IAPMO was right beside me on many of these meetings and speaking with me, and I'm sad to report that we lost Bob April the 2nd, suddenly, with a heart aneurysm. He's no longer with us. That did come as sad news for those of us that knows Bob Shepard. He's not only a colleague but a friend, so he's indeed will be missed. Taking his place is Mr. Brian Rogers, and he's not with us today. He was with me for the study session on Monday. But we will be seeing more and more of Mr. Rogers as he has taken the area that Mr. Shepard had previously. As we know, we get to this point, the codes change every 3 years on the international level, and that's both through the International Code Council and IAPMO. They have annual conferences. Prior to these conferences, numerous comments come in from the international community, from stakeholders, from special interest groups, from contractors, from design professionals. All of this information is compiled, and it's very much like we do with our subcommittees, whereas each body of the code is individually assigned to a group. And all of this information is compiled, so at the annual meetings, it's voted upon, these changes, these modifications, these advances in technology, whatever the case may be. On both the International Code Council and IAPMO, they use this process, and we do a similar process here with our subcommittee meetings, which we've had 29 of which, 29 subcommittee meetings. We've had 11 Building Advisory Board meetings to get to this point. We've accomplished a total reduction of a previous Salina code amendments. We've reduced that by 129. Again, the several meetings that we've had resulted in the reduction of this, whereas we're enforcing the code much as it is written to every extent possible. And there's several reasons that jurisdictions do this. The fewer amendments that you have in the code, the more clear the code is to the design professionals, the contractors, and everyone in the field that works with the code, along with the building departments, it becomes very clear that there's no amendments. It's uniform, and it's easier to understand the fewer amendments that you have. Understanding that every jurisdiction in America has some amendments to the code. It must be that way. Specifically, if you look at administrative purposes, fee schedules, those type of things. The code is not going to address that. They're not going to dictate what permit fee you should charge and those type of things. They can give you templates, they can give you guidance, but that's up to the jurisdiction. So knowing that there are amendments in every jurisdiction, again, we try to limit it, and another twofold reason we do this, we try to stay as parallel as we can with the State Fire Marshal's Office. They're in the process of adopting the 2012 edition of the codes. We don't want to be under that. We don't want to be above that too much. We want to stay as parallel with that as possible, and it makes it easier across the state in doing so. Some states have their own building codes. For example, California has its universal building code. It's throughout the state. It doesn't matter which jurisdiction you go through. Florida has one. I believe Arizona's in the process. Ohio has one. So it doesn't matter which jurisdiction you go to, the code is the same. It's a statewide code. Will that happen in Kansas one day? Perhaps, perhaps not. For now, each jurisdiction goes forth with their codes and their code amendments and adopt on the local level to provide the best codes as possible for the constituents of the jurisdictions, for our citizens of Salina. This has been an extraordinary effort between our building advisory board, our subcommittees, our design professionals, our contractors, much input, much of which was quite boisterous at times to get to this point. But this is the end result that we are planning on adopting for the city of Salina so that we can be assured of the safest structures, plumbing, mechanical systems as possible for the citizens of Salina. We'll begin this afternoon, this evening, with the International Building Code. This is by no means every amendment nor every change to the code. To do so, for those of us that have sat through all the subcommittees, and for those in the audience that were attending all these subcommittees, it's a refresher because, you know, what happened in 2014, we may have forgotten a little bit, but it is a refresher. It refreshes our mind of what we have covered and where we came since that point to get to where we are today. It's not all-inclusive, not meant to be all-inclusive. The ordinances that we will present to the City Commission will be all-inclusive as to every change that we have, and that is forthcoming. We've not got to the point yet. I still have legal review and things like this to do with the ordinances, but we're getting much closer to getting to the adoption process. Reference codes and standards. For the 2012 edition, the building code wanted to make certain that anytime there's a conflicting standard, the IBC will prevail, whichever reference standard it may be. The IBC, it will be the code which prevails. Definitions, for the first time, all definitions within the code body, and it's not just the International Building Code, it's the residential code, the fire code. Consistently in the international code bodies, all definitions are now located in Chapter 2, regardless of whether it's the International Building, International Residential Code, International Fire Code. All of the definitions are located in respective Chapter 2 of those code bodies. Previously, definitions were scattered throughout the code, which made it difficult as well. More definitions have been added, more so specific to care facilities and these type of things. Wanted to clarify what 24-hour care is. After all the additions of the code, you would have thought that would have been addressed several editions ago. For some reason it was not. And now it's defined as the actual time a person is an occupant within a facility for the purpose of receiving care. They make it very plain. Custodial care. This is somewhat new, whereas we're seeing more and more of the assisted living type facilities. This is becoming very common. And custodial care, not necessarily is it in assisted living facility or professional office building or professional business. This can also address at home. If you have relatives at home or whatever the case may be, that you have to have someone come in and assist with living tasks. And capable of self-preservation, that one is very much defined now. It's always been defined because you know that there's something going on there with that person where they could not possibly save themselves in case of an emergency event, fire, whatever the case may be. They had surgery, whatever. It's now just expanded to include mental limitations, chemical dependency, and other items that had not previously been defined. Medical care, of course, is involving any medical or surgical procedures, nursing, or for psychiatric purposes. Psychiatric purposes is new to the 2012 edition. Nursing homes is a little more clearly defined than what it has been in the past. And it includes your intermediate care and skilled nursing. Intermediate being different levels of assisted living. Group I2, this classification is now only applicable to a medical facility where 6 or more individuals are incapable of self-preservation and are receiving care. Where there's 5 or fewer, it's now classified as R3, and it can be constructed and regulated under International Residential Code. Previously, that was not the case, and if you're foster care, detox facilities, hospitals, nursing homes, those are examples of our I2 facilities. Key being 6 or more individual before it's classified as I2. Live-work units is new. It's not a new concept. Actually, it's a very old concept. This fits into mixed use, which has been quite popular in Europe and other areas for generations. Live work is basically the bottom floor is used for an art studio, whatever the case may be, and the resident lives on the upper floor. New urbanism is a driving force behind this as well, and we're seeing this much more prevalent. People want to live and work in the same building as opposed to commuting a long ways to work. There's an example of a live-work unit. The art studio being on the lower level, living quarters up on the upper level. And this could be configured, that could be a chiropractor's office, some other type of office, accountant, whatever the case may be. Children's play structures. This regulation only previously applied to covered mall buildings. We all know children's play structures are quite prevalent everywhere. So now this regulation is applicable to any structures within any building that's regulated by the International Building Code, regardless of what type of occupancy. So they are truly addressed 100%. Address modification is a change. This change was driven not only from the code, but from the emergency responders, our fire officials, police, etc., throughout the nation, whereas the code requires 4 inches high as far as the height of the numbers for addressing with a half-inch stroke. And that's been consistent for years. Well, what is inconsistent is that if you're several feet away from this building and there's a fire emergency or another type of medical emergency and our emergency responders cannot see the address, it delays their response time along with everything else. So much debate, deliberation, discussion went over in the past several years to come up with this table. And now it defines how many feet from the edge of the property line or edge of the road that you are, is how these letters are going to increase. You know, if you're 0 to 25 feet, it's going to be the 4 inches. If it's, that should be 26 to 50 feet, 6 inches, 51 to 100, 8 inches, and so on. So the emergency responders can easily find you in case of an emergency. This will also be contrasting colors on a contrasting background so that it doesn't blend in. If you paint the address the same color as your house, again, that's difficult for the firefighters to distinguish as well. This section addresses above ceiling spaces. For instance, the back wall here, if that's a 1 hour fire assembly and it's separating this space from the adjacent space next door, it's not uncommon, especially after the fact. We've done inspections, the occupancy has a CO, the building owner decides, you know, 3 months down the road, man, I need another data cable, or I need IT, or I need something. It's not uncommon that the ceiling tile is lifted up, a cable the size of my finger has a hole now in the wall this big, and that's not sealed back. So it has, in essence, taken away the fire rating from this fire assembly and this firewall. They are now to be marked on each corner, 15 feet from the end of each wall and at least every 30 feet. And that marking will say fire and or smoke barrier, protect all openings. That is to encourage whomever comes in after the fact, do not penetrate this wall. And if you do, there's certain measures you must take to assure that it retains its fire rating. This is the example of the signage. This is the typical our acoustical ceiling, our lay-in ceiling. And if you lift a tile on our new buildings henceforth, you'll see this painted on the wall. Stencil, whatever the case may be. To help remind everyone, do not penetrate this firewall or fire barrier. And if you do, it must be restored to its condition where the fire rating is not reduced. This is also a new section. We often see that in basements sometimes there's different things that can obstruct the water hose from the fire departments, petitions, whatever the case may be. If it can obstruct that water hose stream, it is then required to have a fire sprinkler system. Regardless, if it's over 1,500 square feet. Group E, that's our educational occupancies. It has now been modified and it requires a voice alarm communication system with an occupant load of 30 or more. Previously, that number was 50. So it's not just the fire alarm, it's the voice fire alarm system, where a voice is actually coming on, evacuate the building, exit, fire, or whatever the case may be. There's an example of one of the panels. Carbon monoxide. Group R and I, that's our residential and our institutional industrial occupancies. If it has a fuel burning appliance or attached garage, carbon monoxide alarms are now required. Smoke detector and carbon monoxide, combination of both are readily available as well to take care of two issues at once. For the first time in 2012, these are now allowed. These electromagnetically locked egress doors, and we see this numerous times on school projects. Because of security reasons, schools, it's not just fire threat that we're worried about. Society has changed, so there's many other threats that we want to make sure nobody can access the school or get into the school due to various reasons. So this is now allowed, and they are acceptable. However, they are tied into the fire alarm system. In case of a fire alarm, each and every one of these are tied into that system, so it automatically releases in case of a fire so that people can easily exit the building and not be trapped in the building. And we make certain that it works to that end. So there's a balancing act between schools now, and it has been for the past few years. Fire protection, fire safety, fire evacuation, and exiting, and security. So we finally balanced those items, and this is now accepted as being one of those that provides both security and safety. Carbon monoxide, as we mentioned, these are suggested locations. Smoke alarm is represented by this symbol, the carbon monoxide by the circles. There's an example of our electromagnetic block. We see them often. Floor level exit signs in a group R1. Group R1 being our hotels, motels, boarding houses. In addition to an exit sign that is up high, if you look at any one of our exits, exit signs are where? They're at the top. Always at the top. What happens when that room's full of smoke? Smoke rises, it doesn't descend. So once that exit sign is blocked from smoke, you cannot see how to exit. So these signs are now required in all of our group R1s. This is an example of what we're talking about. These low signs here, there's in darkness, normal operation. If smoke was filling the corridor and this sign was blocked, we could still crawl on the floor to find this exit and find our way out of the building. Now we'll move on to the International Residential Code. Garage opening protection. This item has been in and out of the code for probably the past 9 years, 10 years. It was in 2000, it was taken out in 2003, it was put back in another, I think the 2009, it was taken out, and now it's back in. Basically, all that is a self-closing device on the door that serves the garage to the main living quarters. There's a self-closing hinge because people always leave that door open. If there's a fire in the garage, it can easily traverse into the kitchen area or wherever this door is feeding, the living area, whatever case may be. So now we want to make sure that that door remains closed. So this is that 20-minute fire-rated door that's in that assembly separating your garage, your attached garage from your living quarters. Mechanical ventilation, where your doors, louvers, and other openings do not provide a minimum openable area now, 4% of the area being served, mechanical ventilation is now required. On newer homes that we see, it's rare that this is going to occur because it's easy to obtain 4% of a floor area with openable windows, etc. And the driving force between a lot of new homes is people prefer to have natural light, that type of thing. So they don't want to be basically living in a cave with no windows. Here's an example of the hinge. They vary cost, I don't know, I think these things are about $7, $8 a piece. Not very expensive. Now, that's not to say that after we inspect it, we give the CEO the occupancy and the house has been granted, that the homeowner will say, you know, I'm tired of this door shutting every time I try to bring my groceries in. And modifications can be made at that time unaware of us. Example of the whole house ventilation that spoke of. Emergency escape and rescue windows, we know that this code provision's been in the code since 97, probably before. The only thing that changed this time is the measurement of the seal height. It's now going to be measured from the finished floor to the bottom of the clear opening, not the top of the seal. So that 1-inch seal, or however high that seal is, I suppose makes a difference to some people if they're trying to evacuate the building. For those of us like me, vertically challenged, I suppose it can make a difference. Underwell drainage, now designed to direct surface water to the foundation drainage system. There has to be some type of a drainage system in these window wells. There's an example of our window wells. The 5.7 square feet has not changed, and that has not changed since the 90s or before. The size of these window wells has not changed in years. The thing has changed is from this finished floor to the opening and not the window sill. Guards and window fall protection, this is new for the 2012. If you have a second floor, whatever the case may be, and that window sill is less than 24 inches above the floor, and that opening is more than 6 feet above the grade to your exterior grade, you must have window fall protection installed. These are 3 examples. There's window openings that can't open but so far. There's other devices out there now. And now, the smoke alarms, we now specifically recognize wireless smoke alarms, whereas that was not the case in previous editions. Interconnected battery backup. Interconnected battery backup. Wireless systems are now acceptable because that's becoming more and more the norm of what we see as well. This is the example that we're talking about. 24 inches is the magic number. If it is 24 inches or above, no fall protection required. If it is less, some means has to be installed to prevent this window from opening more than 4 inches. In this case, this latch control that can only be released totally by an adult, when it's in place, a child cannot open this window more than 4 inches. There's another example, typical sash, but the device here will only allow this window to open 4 inches. So there's no danger of the child falling out the window. Fire protection of floors. This applies to I-joist, open web floor trusses, cold form steel. Your 2x10s, your 2x12s, solid lumber, this does not apply to that. Roof flashing has changed and is just requiring a kick-out flashing now, and I'll show you in a moment. I-joist. This must be drywall. It must be sealed off and not exposed if you choose to use that assembly. If you're using 2x10s, 2x12s, they can remain open because the I-joist and overhead floor joist has been shown at fire events. A firefighter will fall through that floor with his gear. If he's standing on this first floor and there's a fire underneath, it takes approximately 4 to 6 minutes and it's gone. As opposed to the standard 2x12s, 2x10s that we use for floor joists, that time is more than double. sometimes up to 16 minutes before they'll burn through. Open web, same way. So much oxygen, so much to feed on. These will burn out. They're extremely strong, well designed. They're very good on silencing squeaks in the floor, but they are not efficient whatsoever with fires. There's one of the tests that I was speaking of. This total collapse happened in 4.5 minutes using I-joist. The fire underneath the fireman here in the basement, them standing on the floor. So it was extremely quick. There was no chance. If the firefighter has fell through the floor, it's of little resolve to the occupants of the home if they cannot evacuate them sufficiently because they've already been injured. The kickback flashing I was speaking about, we all see our upper story dormers, windows, whatever the case may be. Instead of causing a ponding effect here and a wicking effect, the flashing now is going to kick the water out away from the corners and those dead zones. Energy efficiency we'll discuss later. That's now become our new Chapter 8 Division 6. Many discussions went on with this, many meetings. All of our board members were in attendance for those meetings and served on the subcommittee, along with several of our design professionals and other interested parties and contractors. The fire code. The fire code and the building code share a common theme. These two codes are specific to and only specific to commercial buildings. They do not address residential buildings. Residential buildings are addressed with the International Building Code, International Residential Code, excuse me. Also, Chapters 7, Chapters 9 of both the International Building Code and the International Fire Code are identical. They share the same language 100%. This is a new section, and although this is not a new phenomenon, it's a new section. Open burning recreational fires, portable outdoor fireplaces. The key being that portable outdoor fireplaces has not been addressed before in any one of the code bodies. These include those chimeneas, these little fire pits, etc., that are becoming so popular people have in the backyard. There is a restriction now, and it prohibits these things from being operated within 15 feet of a structure or combustible material. However, you must note, 1 and 2 family dwellings, which is our single family dwellings, it does not apply. The common sense rule would apply with residential dwellings. Understand that the fire code is talking about multifamily dwellings, apartment buildings, things like that. There's an example of what we're speaking of. We've seen them often. They sell them quite frequently in the fall. I think Menards has those by the truckload. Traffic calming devices. This is new. And it requires approval by the fire code official. That would be our fire marshal, our fire chief, whatever case may be, before someone can install a traffic calming device. So we're planning a new subdivision, and we want to plan on putting a traffic control device in, or even an existing subdivision. And we want to slow people down. They're driving too fast through my neighborhood. This will now have to be addressed by the fire code official. And he also works very closely, and will continue to work closely with the Public Works Department and the city engineer at the city as to how high these can be and those type of things. What we're looking at is not to high side or high center, basically, an emergency vehicle with one of these devices has been approved. Not to delay any emergency response. Again, emergency responder, this is for our new buildings. There may be a repeater or something like that that's going to be required in our new structures if it's multi-story, so that we can be assured that the firefighter can communicate from the basement to the first floor, to the second floor, to the top floor, and have sufficient radio coverage. Salina Regional I believe it's already done this one time for the fire department. They have a repeater installed in their basement presently. Example of a calming device. Now, this is a general calming device. You know, we start thinking about speed bumps, and it's just a small bump of asphalt. This is more of a calming device. It gently lifts up and goes down without causing such an abrupt stop and go action as the old asphalt logs we used to call them. This is the radio coverage we were speaking of. These are repeaters or other controls necessary so that they can be assured to have radio coverage throughout the building on all floors to include the basement. Pump and riser rooms, they are now sized or will be sized and by the equipment manufacturer's specifications. Some of these things, some of the fire protection systems equipment are in too small of closets, we'll say, to make it easy to maintain or to identify. Now, this service personnel that we're speaking of here is that just anyone cannot service fire extinguishers. They need to have some type of a certification. And that's what they're finally clarifying in the code text and the code body. You must have a certification to be allowed to service your fire extinguishing equipment for a company or someone to do that for you. Example of one of the certifications offered through the International Code Council. This has been modified. It's not necessarily new. Portable fire extinguishers in any occupancy, it is now required, whether it's protected by an automatic sprinkler system or not. Fire extinguishers must be included. There used to be an exception for that. There's still the only one exception remaining now is R2. R2 being our apartments, condominiums, those type of things. The portable fire extinguishers in the public spaces can be eliminated in a R2 if every apartment, each dwelling unit, has its own fire extinguisher. And that extinguisher is provided within each dwelling unit. There was a lot of debate on this. How are you going to know this? How are you going to prove this? The dwelling unit hasn't been rented. This is a brand new facility. Nobody's living in it. We get a CO. There's no fire extinguishers in the dwelling unit because they're going to wait for someone to move in and put a fire extinguisher in the dwelling unit. So there was quite a bit of debate back and forth on this one. But this is the way the code remained even after all the debate. Again, emergency evacuation is addressed identical to the IBC for voice communication along with the fire alarm system. The fire alarm control panel is what we're talking about here. It's now required that a smoke detector, a single smoke detector, be located above this fire alarm control panel in an area or buildings not occupied or utilized 24/7. And it would, to provide a signal to the fire department there was an error or something going on. There was a problem of some degree. Floor identification signs, it is new. These are to be maintained in an approved manner. They are very, very specific on what they are to look like, what they are to identify. And this is for all enclosure, for all exit enclosure. So we're looking at all stairways more than 3 stories. It's going to identify our termination point at the top and bottom, whether roof access is available in this particular building. Exit discharge is going to be identified, and they are required at each and every floor level. So if you're in the stairway of a new building, hotel, whatever the case may be, Every stairway will have this sign. It's going to easily identify the floor number where you are located, 5th floor. It's going to give verbiage. There is no roof access. To exit, you must go down to 1st floor for exit discharge. And there's 24 floors in this building. You need to go down. Do not go up to the 24th floor and then have to climb all the way back down. So each floor is identified. This is also, Braille is required. So every stairway that you see will have signage. It's very specific as to the height, 60 inches above the finished floor, and to the verbiage is going to be exactly like this. To easily identify where you are in the building in case of an emergency event. Our plumbing code. The Uniform Plumbing Code, we had, in and of itself, 9 meetings. We had numerous contractors, design professionals, etc. in these meetings. And there was much discussion with the plumbing code. And keynotes is what we're providing today. Again, I'm not providing every one of the amendments. It would take us another 3 months to go through all of this. But we will hit the highlights on what is due between the 26th and 2012 for our Uniform Plumbing Code. Chapters 16 and 17. These are new alternate water sources, non-potable application, non-potable rainwater catchment system. It's becoming more and more popular as the green movement continues. People want to do things better for the environment. So let's catch our rainwater in barrels. Let's catch our rainwater in a cistern. Remember the old cisterns. Let's have some type of catchment tank, buy something that we can catch all our rainwaters and irrigate our lawns, etc., without using the water supply, domestic water supply. Let's save water in that regard. So these 2 new sections address that and allow that application. Sustainable practices, water conservation. This new appendix addresses those items that was not previously the 2006 edition. Chapter 4 provides our minimum plumbing facilities table. Water supply and distribution, sanitary drainage, this has been revised. And the joint connection requirements were changed slightly on this. The keynote thing we need to focus upon for this meeting today throughout the time that I've been with the city, Table 2902.1 of the 2006 International Building Code has been the source for our plumbing fixture count. Our source for the plumbing fixture count, once this is adopted, is going to be 422.1 of the Uniform Plumbing Code. So the table reference is going to change. The table is going to reference to the Uniform Plumbing Code as opposed to an International Building Code. We've enforced the Uniform Plumbing Code for many years. Why 422.1 was not enforced, for some reason it didn't occur. So presently, this is what we do. And I have a couple examples here of what the present counts are, say, for a nightclub or a restaurant or a business. Urinals are also substituted in the International Building Code for a maximum of 67% of the required water closets for male restrooms. Such is not the case on 422.1. It's a specific count that's going to be required. Is it a great number? Is it a tremendous number? Oh man, we must have many more plumbing fixtures now. Or is it going to make us have more plumbing fixtures, more water closets, more lavatories? In some cases, the answer will be yes. Other cases, the answer will be no. Very little, if any, change. And we're looking at a 400 occupant load, just as a base figure. Again, this is what will be required. As you see, the 67% allowance that we saw at the bottom of the previous slide is no longer applicable because specific numbers are applicable for urinals, etc. And to compare the two, using the example that I just gave you, it would net in a restaurant with a 400 occupant load an increase of 2 water closets, 2 toilets, and it would reduce 1 urinal, an increase of 1 sink, lavatory. For female, it would result in an increase of 2 water closets and 2 lavatories. For bar, nightclub use, the example provided would result in an increase of 1 water closet, reduction of 4 urinals, and an increase of 1 lavatory. And for female, a reduction of 2 water closets and 2 lavatories. Office use, increase of 1 water closet, reduction of 3 urinals for male, reduction of 1 lavatory, and an increase of 2 water closets for female. Another example I provide here is the parallel, because of all our educational occupancies and the work that's going on with the USD 305 bond project. These two comparisons are showing our educational occupancy. Again, educational being kindergarten through 12th grade. Currently, we use table 2902.1. We will now be using table 422.1 of the 2012 UPC once adopted, and you'll see the difference here. As far as male, very little difference. Female, there is difference. Some of this goes back to what was called many, many years ago the potty parity law, whereas females need more toilet facilities. It takes more time, understandably so, than what does on the male side. So this is table 422.1. The Uniform Plumbing Code has always been more favorable to the potty parity law, and it's just getting closer and closer and closer to that common ground. So we will be utilizing that. Will it result in more fixtures for educational? Yes, only on the female side, but the number is not going to be extremely significant based upon the bond projects that we have going on at this point. For a brand new school, it could add quite a number of fixtures. Uniform mechanical, not very many changes between 2006 and 2012. There were some. Again, we currently enforce the Uniform Mechanical Code as well. We have new requirements for our piping, tubing, balancing, louvers. This general requirement, Chapter 3 is going to change in every edition because of new technology, new systems, etc. that are out there. Specific appliances, new provisions of medallion for evaporative cooling systems, and the refrigeration. This is one to note because I was unaware of the problem America was having with this. It's been revised now. You have to have refrigerant port protection, and here's what we're talking about. For your outside AC unit, these ports cannot be accessed, for your refrigerant to recharge your system without a very special tool. These special tools are only going to be available to HVAC technicians. They're not necessarily going to be available to the general public. That's not to say that you're not going to be able to go to your friend and say, hey, I need that tool so I can charge my system, take this cap off. The reason that we have to cap these now, there has been such a problem with huffing. Teenagers, other ones, apparently this gets very, very high. It's a very, very big problem throughout the nation. So now these ports are required so that an individual doesn't have access, or you go to recharge your system or mow your lawn one day and there's a teenager laying in the gravel or whatever, or on the yard that's overdosed on this stuff. It is that much of a problem. So now this is required. Again, this tool supposedly is not going to be available to just the homeowner or whatever, is the HVAC technician. So that may mean that our HVAC technicians may have to buy a separate tool now because of this. Hydronics, these are new requirements. And hydronics, we're looking at basically our radiant floor heating system. It's addressed much more in detail than it has been in the past. Do we want to embark on the Energy Conservation Code? That would be a negative.
Maybe save that one for next month.
I can't say this for next month if you prefer, but for the remainder, we don't have, that. We've got this in the electric code to go. So if it's at the chair's discretion, we can pause at this point, bring this back to you next month, continue our conversation, and have another study session to finish this up. This one's going to take a little more discussion as far as not only bringing this to you, but I want to bring to you, as you recall in the International Residential Code to the subcommittee, you saw a highlight on there, Chapter 8, Division 6 is new to the city of Salina. We want to make sure that we bring that to everyone here, and we can see Chapter 8, Division 6, which parallels, and in essence, it replaces Section 4 of the International Energy Conservation Code. For the first time, to clarify one thing, the International Energy Conservation Code is now combined. Okay. Anything that has the prefix of C, the letter C, is for commercial application only. They also have included in the same volume residential requirements. So when we went through the International Residential Code Subcommittee and we established the Chapter 8, Division 6, applicable to the city of Salina, it has amended this residential provision of the International Energy Conservation Code. So those will be the provisions that will be applicable to the city of Salina as it relates to energy conservation for our residential properties. Commercial remains in the text of this code. Again, it had to be created as a new section to address our commercial entities, whereas it wasn't addressed before in any previous editions or previous amendments in the city of Salina. So there's been a lot of work done on this, and we want to make sure we bring all of that information. That's what I'm saying. In 10 minutes, not quite certain we can make that happen. This and the electrical will probably be most of our discussion anyway. Okay. So at your discretion, if you want to bring that back next month, we can do so, or we can drive forward.
I think everybody's looks like next month. Bring it back next month. We'll go through it.
Very good. Well, with that, staff doesn't have anything else, but till next month, of course, we'll bring this back and reintroduce what items we have remaining at the board's discretion. Any other educational or study items that you may wish for next month, you can email or send me any memos or whatever that you have. And each one of you that's on this board, I applaud each and every one of you. I applaud each and every one of you that were in the subcommittee meetings and sat down and we went through this process. Is it long? Yes. Is it complete? Yes. Are we satisfied? We're all on the same sheet of music? We're there. We're almost there. So, wonderful accomplishment to all involved. And we've come milestones from when it's been in the past. So, very good. And I thank each and every one. Appreciate it.
I think the same goes for you, Jim. I think you've done a great job.
Working on this for the last
It's a lot of work.
months and value and fearless leader.
Well, fearless or not, here I am.
Okay. Any other business or announcements? future agenda topics other than carrying this forward?
Carrying this forward is going to be our future agenda topic and get through this last portion.
Is there any questions or from the audience or any?
PowerPoint will be online. Is this PowerPoint accessible to?
Is it accessible to the general public?
Well, for contractors.
We could probably put it on a website, so you'd have access.
You can put it on our department website.
Sure. It will be there.
Okay. Still remains 2 openings for youth members on the board. Any expression of interest forms may be obtained at our website. And other than that, there's nothing else. Meeting's adjourned.